Welcome to the Vine Podcast. This is Warren, and today's episode features a conversation that I was able to have recently with longtime Vine member Maxine Huddleston. Maxine has served and blessed our church family in a number of different ways over the years, and one of the ways in which she has done that is by using her gifts as an artist for several different projects. Last week, Maxine painted a scene with a cross as part of our church's Images of the Cross project that coincides with our current sermon series that we're going through on Sunday mornings. And in today's episode, Maxine is going to share about painting that painting in particular, about her experiences as an artist in general, about her favorite painting, and much more along the way. And so we hope that you enjoy this conversation about art, faith, life, and learning to see. All right, well, Maxine, thank you for spending some time with us today, and glad you're willing to do this for us. So you painted several things for us at church, and including apparently some things that other people didn't even know that you had painted, like the pictures of they're parts of a tree, right, in the foyer.
Yeah, rooted in God, growing in Christ,
reaching the world, yeah. And then you did another tree for us during the pandemic time, and now you've painted this image of the cross for us in connection with what we're doing now. And so to begin with, I want to kind of start there with the painting that you just did of the cross. And kind of, did you have a certain inspiration, or how did you kind of come to decide on painting that image? What was that process like for you?
Well, your sermon Sunday was encouraging us to do something, and I already knew that you were going to ask us to do that because of Rachel, but I had told her I didn't feel inspired to do anything, really. And then I always believe in trying to respond when somebody's trying to encourage people to do things. So as you were you kind of mentioned that, I hope we have something here. And I thought, oh, Maxine, you need to do something because and respond to Warren. So actually my response was a lot in wanting to just make sure that, things were going well for you and you're encouraging us. So as I was, when the sermon was over, I was kind of listening to the end and then the communion and everything, and I thought, kind of, what could I do? And then I realized, I thought, well, I've always wanted to paint one of the sunsets that I've taken pictures of out on the lake, and I thought, I could just take that one of the sunsets and then just leave the lake out, put a hill in there, put the cross on it. That ought to be something simple and easy to do, and be in accordance with your wishes to do a cross, because I didn't want just to paint a big cross. Mm-hmm. I just couldn't think about that. I think of things in terms of a scene, and so I thought, well, I'll just paint a scene with a cross in it. That's how I came up with that.
Yeah. And
then the most recent picture that I had of a sunset was one that had popped up in the last week, and I loved that sunset, but I had no idea how hard that one was going to be to paint. It was very different because it was sort of like a scene where the clouds burst kind of behind the sunset on up into the sky, but they were dark and kind of a little, not ominous, because it kind of looked a little bouncy and interesting. It was just an interesting sky. So I think, I'll just do that. And I didn't look back to find an easier sky, which I kind of wish I had, because I did have some trouble with those clouds.
Well, I thought the thing that I thought made it such a great scene or visual for the cross image and scene is that it does, like you said, that the clouds are dark and they do look, I kind of got a little bit of a feeling of there's almost a foreboding kind of nature to them, but the sun is breaking through these kind of dark clouds, and I think that, to me, that's such a great imagery for kind of a backdrop of the cross, which is sort of dark and foreboding violent and all of those things on one hand, but it's also light breaking through all of that. It's light breaking through the darkness and the clouds and the gloom. And so it felt like, and it looked like a very appropriate, I thought, kind of backdrop for this image of the cross.
Right, and I think as I was conceiving it, like I say, the clouds are dark, but they have a little bit of a light kind of casting through them, and I thought, well, when I do the cross, it'll silhouette against it, but then when I do the foreground, which was not a lot, but I thought I'll make that kind of, more dark and everything, and then it's like you said, after the cross, there will be light. And I kind of thought of it that way too, and so that my foreground is real, kind of an odd, strange, dark foreground. I had that same feeling that there was a sort of a darkness with the cross, and then the picture itself kind of had a bright tone to it, and the sky behind it is kind of bright blue, so it kind of had a happy look to it too. Yeah,
it did. So I thought it turned out very well. So I appreciate you spending all the time and effort and energy on it, because I know, especially once you go down the road of investing yourself in something like that, it seems to be there's endless ways that you could keep adding to it, or keep kind of. There's a lot that you see, I'm sure, as the painter that no one else would ever see, that you may think of kind of as errors or things to fix that other people would not even notice.
That did not turn out at all like my imagination of doing that picture was so glorious, but it fell far short of that. And part of it was because I really could not figure out the clouds. But so I they just looked like, the first effort was like, it looked like a candelabra in the sky or something. Anyway, I thought, well, I'm going to just stop that, and I'm going to go down and do the sunset, and see if I can make that work, then I'll worry about the other. If I can't make that work, I may just scrap the whole thing.
Well, I'm glad you didn't scrap it, because I think it turned out really well.
Well, it turned out okay, I guess, but it does nothing like I imagined in my mind.
Well, that's probably a metaphor for life, right? We have these grand visions, and then they don't work out, and we make the best of it. So
and that's another thing. There was a photograph that I looked up on for my cross. I kind of went to the internet and looked. I just put in crosses, scenes of crosses or something. And anyway, they did have some really almost kind of the same thing as I had conceived of, but the skies were real dark, and one was just real purple and orange and everything. But it was done in such a way that I probably could have copied that photo. Well, it wasn't really a photo, it was a painting. So to copy a painting is so much easier than to do something from real life or a photograph, because it's already interpreted for you. And all the nuances of making it look right are already done. And I'm very good at that. I can copy anything and make it look almost, picture perfect. But I'm not so good at painting from real life, or even my own photographs, because there you have to have that interpretive notion and idea. That's why I use Jamie so much. Because Jamie, on the clouds, I texted and said, I'm just these clouds that just look like flat stuff on the sky. And it's just, and she came and kind of helped me understand that they were, even though they were dark, they were still clouds painted like you do a clouds in a sky. Well, if I'd had more time, I probably could have done a lot better. But I kind of went in and just, she kind of helped me think about how to do that. And I went back over it. Then I went back over it again this morning, because I thought it was the darks were too dark, and our light wasn't really good last night. But anyway. Well,
yeah, and anytime you're doing things kind of on a timeline like that, when you have a deadline, so to speak, at some point you've just got to say, all right, this is going to be good. And I feel like that a lot of times, even with like sermons, that if when you have to have one every Sunday, it's like, well, this one did not turn out the way I wanted it to, or it never got to the point that I wanted it to, yes. But it's Saturday, so we'll have to be okay with it.
Yeah, sometimes things just work out really good, and then sometimes they don't work out. And like I committed my mind to it, then I came home and I began to look immediately, try to think, found that photograph, and I got started painting immediately that Sunday afternoon. And of course, when I get in on the sky, and that I am a little inspired when I'm doing just a big sky, and I go really after it, getting in the sky, until I got to those clouds. But anyway, because I knew I was on a timeline, and I was going to get it done by Sunday, but I really thought it was going to be easier than it turned out to be. But anyway, mainly because my concept of those clouds was not right. If I'd have thought about it right in the first place, it would have probably worked out better.
Well, I think it ended up looking really good, and I appreciate you doing it. And I know that your art has been, and this one will continue to be a great blessing for many in our church. And so I kind of wanted to kind of think then just generally about art and painting, because like I said, that gift that you have has served to bless our congregation in several different ways now. And so I would be curious just to kind of hear, how did you get started in painting? Is this kind of been a lifelong pursuit, or just kind of, can you share with us just some of your history painting and how you got involved with it and what you like about it?
Well, when I was just very young, probably not more than 3 or 4, my folks thought, how you always give kids paper and pencils and things. Back then we didn't have, I don't even think I had crayons, but I had pencils. And I would take the newspaper and copy the funnies. And I could just do them almost perfect. And my father was just, I got a lot of attention for that, kind of bragging on you, from the family, and Maxine can really draw, So then as the years went by, like even in probably in the 4th grade, they were going to do a Santa Claus and the reindeer down the middle of the hallway, clear down this long hall. And the teacher knew I could draw, so she asked me to draw the Santa Claus and the reindeer almost life size. We cut them out and then hung them down the hall. Well, that got, I got a lot of attention for that. And then, then in high school, I took art with a friend, and I really didn't do very well in there because I'm not an original artist. I'm more of a technician. I copy what I see. Mm-hmm. So the kids that could have an original work, they got more attention than what I did for what I did. But anyway, but then I got to college, and when Ronald would be studying, he was just like he never talked. He was just always working, studying, thinking. So when I would get through with my homework and stuff, I would start just drawing him. And, he found out, that's how he found out I could draw. So then when he was in medical school, and he was gone a lot, one night after church, we stopped by to get groceries at this little grocery store. And right next there was a pharmacy, and they had a little easel set up in the window, and then a little paint set and everything. He said, "I'm going to get that for you." And he went in and bought that. And I said, I've never painted. And he said, "But you can, I know you can." And so he encouraged me, and he got that little paint set for me. And when he was gone, I, of course, did paint a lot. And then I began to paint things for friends. And then while I was gone to California, I painted a great big Currier of knives. Like I tell you, mostly I'd copy things. So I did a great big Currier of knives. Well, they were having an art contest in Dallas at the public library. And he took it down to the public library, and I was gone to California. And I got the first prize.
Oh, wow.
On that Currier knives painting, which actually was I did for my mother. And then I just got a lot of, it was gratifying to paint things that my family wanted in their homes, and then I would paint them and give them to them. And then in Africa, I really wanted to start trying to be more original and paint from, and so I was out we called it the Polini, but out on the plains, and I was looking back toward the mountains and sat and painted, a picture, and it was just fascinating because the Africans had no concept of something like that. They couldn't conceive of what I was doing. Art is not something they hang on their walls. Now, and this is 50 years ago, more than 50 years ago, but now they do more. But at that time, out in the plains, those remote places, they didn't know what I was doing. It was really funny.
So what was their response after they kind of saw the finished product?
They still, like even in Bible class, I would do things for the kids to color, real simple things like children, a face or something. The children saw it immediately, but older people, your eye learns how to see things. And they never learned how to see it three-dimensional on a flat piece of paper or a canvas. So I think, I don't even know if they ever saw the picture, because the women, when they would try to color those pictures, everything, they didn't know what it was. They couldn't see a child there like the kids could.
Yeah.
So
That's a fascinating statement that you said, that the eye learns to see things. And, I remember when we lived down at the coast, I got into very amateur photography because I like to go out, and it was a way for me to basically be outside. And so I'd go to all the nature preserves and take pictures of birds and water and all that kind of stuff. And I remember just thinking that you do see things very differently, even like through the camera. Like it looks different through the camera than it does just to the naked eye. And then you do start kind of seeing things differently around you. And so did you feel like, were there things in nature or with people that you started seeing differently once you started painting?
Oh, well, even before I started painting, I think that's another thing probably that made me want to paint, or had always the desire to draw. Like, we used to travel about 20 miles to church always, because there wasn't a congregation of the Church of Christ in our town. And so we'd go every Sunday morning, Wednesday night. They had a meeting every evening. And as we travel, I would see scenes in my head. I mean, anytime, it doesn't matter where I am, I see a picture, and the clouds, of course, when I was little, I'd see all kinds of images in the clouds. But as I got older, I saw that as a whole scene. And I even imagined how I would paint it in my mind. My mind always thinks about how those colors lay against each other and how they show up,
Yeah.
And the whole the technical way of painting is, to some people, it's something you can teach, but a lot of people don't see it very good. There are some people that'll never paint. I was asked to teach a class, night classes. They were having night classes at the high school in Hearn. And some of the people in Hearn knew I painted, so they asked me if I would teach a class. And there was about 3 or 4 women in Hearn that really had wanted to always paint. Well, that's a good sign, if you want to, maybe you can. So these women, just with a little instruction from me, because all they needed was understanding how to make things show up, and how to soften colors, and just if you can draw, you can paint. But painting takes a little bit more understanding of how to move colors around and make things show up. So these women did great, and they began to hang their things at wherever they worked. And then everybody thought they could paint. Well, Maxine taught those people to paint. So the next year around, everybody wanted to be in the class. And then I had a high school class too. Oh, it was just, impossible, because some people just can't see it. And it has something to do with the conception that you see it with your eye.
Yeah. And I'd never thought about that, just that the ways most of us are exposed to art from a young age, and that's, but maybe because it's just a part of life and what we see, we're have more of a recognition of that, perhaps. I hadn't thought about that idea, that just being unable to see it if you weren't attuned to it. And it made me think there's so much in Jesus's teachings about vision, about seeing, about they have eyes to see, but can't.
And there's something about maturing too. Like, I always try to tell young people, well, oil and is probably, or watercolor, that's not your first thing. Draw now, and then you'll do better. Use charcoal first. And other mediums that are easier, more like drawing, because when you start painting, it's another way to look at it. And generally speaking, I'd say most young people, their mind isn't mature enough for it. But I had a African boy that lived with us for about 5 years, And I would start him out with charcoal, and he was really a good artist. And he didn't want to stick with the charcoal, and he insisted on doing oil. Well, he did really great. He did a great lion, and but he had material. He was able to see. But most of the kids I taught in that high school class, their minds weren't ready for understanding about laying colors against each other to make the line. Because when you draw the line.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But when you're painting, you make it show up by how you lay the colors against each other. And that's a different concept.
Yeah. Well, yeah, all kinds of potential lessons there from learning to see. I like that idea. And so I'm wondering though, so as you think back kind of on everything that you've painted, do you have a favorite painting that you've done, or a most memorable one, or one that stands out to you?
That one above the fireplace is my favorite. The bull boys in Africa.
So to describe that one for people.
Well, it's on a mountain. The Great Rift Valley goes through Africa, but right there, as it goes at the end of Tanzania, where the Lake Tanganyika is, it kind of closes up, and then it opens up again as it goes down into Zambia. But at that point, those mountains come together, kind of, and there's the town where we would shop was on a mountain opposite the mountains that we lived on. So we'd follow this road and then come up on this hill, and there was a place that was called, was kind of a lookout point, World's End Point. And anyway, somebody had photographed these boys there, and I saw that photograph and painted it. And I think of all the things I've ever painted. And of course, it has an emotional attachment, because we lived at the foot of the mountains in the distance, and then this was a picnic spot that we used to come to.
Well, I was wondering that as you were describing the scene, and since we were just talking about learning to see. So when you look at that painting now, what do you see?
Well, I see the hope of the future of these little boys, because one of the little boys has a shirt on him that is, they wear these school shirts, and that they say success to these kids, and each class wears a different color. And so you'll see these kids, and they'll wear them until they're just tatters. All they're wearing is a collar and a sleeve, but it's a hope in the future for these kids. And then, of course, I'm sorry, I get emotional. Looking back into where we lived there, and the memories of our life.
Yeah, that's great.
That was very early in our life when we were raising our children. They were just tiny. Like, I think about Bonner. Kevin was about that age when you first came here, and he would play in the dirt with his little cars during church, because it was very easy, much easier to take kids to church then, because they could play.
You can play in the dirt in church.
Yeah. But anyway, it just has good memories.
That's great. And I think that's so much the value, I think, of art, is it has that capability of eliciting an emotional response, especially if you were the one who painted it.
Well, there's another painting in the other room. You can't see it from here, but we would go out on the we called it the Polini, the plains, several villages out, where there was a village that there was a little church there, and we would go there every Sunday for probably a year. We had different churches. We were there about 3.5 years, and we had about 3 different churches we went to. And this church we went to for a long time. And anyway, you'd go clear out there. Then as you were coming home, those mountains that I were mentioning would be in the distance. There was always, the sky was so big in Africa. It's sort of like people talk about when they go out to Lubbock. The sky is so big out there. Well, the sky was so big in Africa. And every afternoon, during the monsoons, the clouds would start accumulating. They would roar up and just make these beautiful, sky scenes. And against the mountain, it would just be so gorgeous. Well, there was this one little village that we would go through that was almost dead. I mean, there were a few people live there still, but like there was this old hut that had kind of broken down, but there was this acacia tree that was a really beautiful big old acacia tree. But the way that it was, the branches were configured, it made a heart that you saw against the skyline as we were coming every Sunday. I'd say, look, Ronald, there's the heart. And it just, I don't know, it just had a real connection to me. And then, so I said, well, Ronald, stop. One day the sky was so pretty and everything. I said, stop and take a picture of that. I want to paint that. And so he did, and I painted that picture. And I like to ask people to look at that picture and see, do you see anything different in there? And it's funny, most people don't see it until I finally mention it.
You have to learn to see.
You have to learn to see it, but and you see the heart for quite a ways. I mean, the way the limbs crossed there, it just made a heart, and a perfect heart. And it was just, like I say, I always love that scene. So that's another scene that I really like that I painted.
Yeah.
And I think I did it really well, except for the foreground was, it was real dark in the photograph, and I knew there was a cornfield there, an old broken down cornfield. So I don't know, I just kind of did it. It's not great there, but I think it is one of my favorite pictures.
That's good. Well, what do you kind of, we've talked about in some of our different classes and conversations and stuff, just kind of some of the different ways that we can engage spiritual practices, or some of the different kind of spiritual disciplines that we can pursue. I'm wondering do you kind of see any type of spiritual aspect or thing like that when you go about the process of painting?
Well, there's the dedication, conceiving of something you want to accomplish, and it takes patience, and you have to the desire has to be there, and of course there's the anticipation of the finished product, and hoping that whoever I'm doing it for, like normally I'm usually doing something for somebody. Mm-hmm. Like the projects at church, they were just things because I was asked to do it. It's not something I would normally have done. But and even in those cases, like the conception of that was yours, like the tree with the leaves of all the colors. I mean, I would never probably have thought of doing that, and then in the foyer that, rooted in God, well, that was something that really, it was an idea that came from Jamie. I mean, she asked me to paint. I said, well, what do you want me to paint? How do you want me to paint it? And she was the one that said what to do, find a tree that looks really almost like roots, and turn it upside down, do the roots, turn it right side up, paint it that way, and then paint a limb off of it, But and those are a lot of times I'm doing things because somebody wants it, and I think that there's the satisfaction and the gratification of their appreciation of it, in the end. Mm-hmm. But
well, in that respect, it's I think there's an element of service certainly to that, or at least mutual edification, right? Yes, that you are. It's a way to bless someone else, and that's because then I used that language earlier intentionally, that I do think you have blessed our church with that gift, and so it is a way of, I think, mutually edifying others around you.
That's what spurs me on. Sometimes, like I say, I'm usually doing something for somebody, and so like this project I did this week, I mean, essentially I did it because of you, I wanted to, maybe not personally please you so much as to help you fulfill the project that you had a vision of having our church do. Well, and I didn't want to.
I think it certainly does that, so thank you. Yeah. And so how long, I think you also kind of spoke to there, it seems like maybe painting is a way to because you talked about it taking patience. And so, man, if you wanted to learn patience, you paint. If you wanted to learn dedication, you could paint. So it's a way of kind of almost building some of those things into your character almost.
And that has something to do with the way you paint. Like, I'm kind of a realist, but like my granddaughter, Hannah, she is an excellent artist. And I remember when she wanted to paint, she doesn't have the patience for that kind of, she can do it. Like she did several that were just pretty detailed. But then I gave her a palette knife, and I mean, with a palette knife, she can knock off a painting in 30 or 40 minutes that looked as good as I could take days doing by just making it very detailed. You know what I'm saying? And that's an inspired talent, because you have to have a very creative eye and understand the subject that well. And that's what I have to see the subject interpreted for myself to do it really well. Whereas she's one of those artists that paints things that I copy. In other words, she can interpret it immediately with the light. She knows where the lights need to be, how, you know, and it's really that's a real talent. But and for that kind of situation, she does it out of the enjoyment. I mean, it's actually a burst of energy. You know what I mean? Well, my only burst of real energy in my paintings has to do with the sky. I really can go after it in the sky, and then it gets down to the details, and sometimes it takes me days to finish what I'm trying to get done, you know.
Yeah, and so as you think about so a painting for you may take hours and hours, days before it's finished.
Yeah. Like I would never release this painting to you, except that we've got a timeline. I think I could do that sky better if I kept working on it.
Well, so I'm wondering, so when you find yourself at one painting for hours and hours on end, are you kind of singularly focused on that painting? Does your mind wander? Do you find yourself in prayer or other kind of contemplation at times, or what's happening in your mind as you're looking at the same painting for many hours?
I'm mostly, wrapped up in that scene a lot, but there are times like sometimes I'll just have something on, like I can have a podcast or something like that, but and that's what I need to do probably, is to listen to those podcasts. I'm not good at just sitting and listening, but I'll turn on, say the television will be on, and I'm just listening to that. Sometimes I'm not even hearing it. Like I can go all afternoon and I don't even know what's been, because I'm too much into what I'm doing. But other times, if it's interesting to me what they're saying, well, then I listen to that as I'm doing, and I can even, like, sometimes somebody will call and I'll keep me on the phone for a while, but I'll be sitting there working, because I can work on the little details and stuff, trying to especially smooth, soften colors and things like that.
Yeah.
But if I'm at a point where I really need to get like figures, like animals or people, something that has to look just like it needs to look, or it's not going to be right. And if I'm doing something like that, I usually would I'll do that thing that has to be right, like the eyes or something first, because if it's not going to be right, I'm just not going to do it. If I can't get it, I just chuck it. But I mostly do get it. I haven't chucked very many paintings. I don't think I've ever left a canvas undone. But
and you mentioned listening to podcasts. And that's one of the things. That's why I enjoy coloring sheets, and because I can listen to a podcast and color. And when I color a coloring sheet, I don't have to think about what I'm creating. I just have to think about what color is going to go where.
Yes.
And so it's a way to kind of engage sort of that part of my brain and remain kind of actively doing something while also listening to a podcast. Right. And so I think for me, that's where kind of art or creative expression has kind of connected with a spiritual practice, is because I'll often do it when I'm listening to, kind of podcast about scripture or Bible or whatever. And if I have this other kind of this outlet that I can kind of,
keeps you sitting there.
It keeps me sitting there. It keeps me engaged. It keeps me active in doing something, and so it's able for me. I'm able to more kind of fully actually invest in what I'm listening to.
And sometimes I really get to listening to something, but yet I keep painting. But if I'm at a point in a painting where like I say, that something's really like that sky that was troubling me, well, then I don't even hear what else is going on. I'm just.
Right.
My mind's there, and I'm just working out a problem kind of thing.
Right.
But sometimes I paint very freely, but it's usually when it's something like, Well, really, skies, like big cumulus skies. I do that very easily. I mean, that's something that I just feel happy doing. You know, it kind of, you can use that's one place that I can use my creative. I don't necessarily make the sky like what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
You know, I can kind of
Interpret it.
I have lived there a little. I do better. I can do that on my own better.
Sort of about a feeling almost.
I get a feeling about a sky, yeah.
Right.
But other things I kind of need more. Like,
Here's
I
what it
paint
is.
best when I'm copying some great artist.
Well, I think I think this is what's fun to me about some of these conversations, because to me there's even a spiritual element of that, right? That Paul always said, imitate me as I imitate Christ.
Exactly. You know, there's an interesting thing there because, you know, when you're in the Prado Museum in Spain or anywhere you go in Europe and you are in a big museum, there are art students there copying those works. And that's how they're learning to paint. Well, that's actually how I learned to paint, but it was just by looking and copying. And yet there's such a kind of a pseudo sophistication in the little amateur art world that they'll have an art show or something and it has to be an original art. There are very few original artists out there in that kind of a world,
right.
You know. And so I just always, I won't even enter a painting until I make it quite clear that, you know, okay, I copied this, you know, and if you want to, I don't want to participate if you're actually wanting original art, you know. I mean, I've done a few original paintings. There's some originals of mine right there, but you can see how that they lack something. and so, you know, but there is a pseudo-sophistication about that some of these little art clubs and all can get into, because all of us are imitating,
right.
You know, art. And there are few really original minds in the world.
Yeah.
And we all recognize them, you know, because, I mean, they make the...
Ecclesiastes says there's nothing new under the sun, right?
Exactly,
so,
yeah. No, but like I consider Hannah original artist. I mean, she sent me some pictures this last week that she was doing for her mother. And, I mean, it's just hard for me to conceive that she, you know, how does she think of doing that? You know what I mean? And, but hers are like not necessarily realistic, you know?
Yeah. Well, even what you were saying, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, but I think there is such truth to that is applicable to other areas of life, where you said, you know, you could keep, if you didn't have to have that painting there by Sunday, you'd keep working on those clouds and doing it. And I think, man, that's probably true in so many areas of our lives, that we just always feel like, well, this isn't exactly the way that I want it. It's not. I feel like there's more there, and sometimes that keeps us from pursuing certain things, or kind of holds us back at times. And yeah, I would think that's an element that you have to learn as an artist of, okay, so when is this done?
That's another thing I'd like to tell you is that when you're teaching art, some people just never know when to stop.
Yeah.
And they will keep going till they ruin it. And that's, you know, there is a point of knowing when you have reached.
Yeah, there's certainly a lesson of discernment.
At least the discernment of when you've done the best you can do at that.
Right.
You know, it's like I know that really if I worked on those clouds, I could get them a lot better. But there are some times when I stop and I realize this is as good as it gets. And but a lot of people will, if they're painting, learning to paint, the thing that young starting out painters do is they just keep stirring till they get mud.
Yeah.
Because if you keep putting colors together, it's all going to turn to brown. And that's an interesting thing. But there was another thing I was thinking about too. Oh, it's the recognizing good design. You know, that's a discernment too. But a lot of times, I've had people want me to paint a picture for them, and I know it's not going to be what they want, what they're really in their mind imagining, because they've given me a bad picture. It's not. There's no way to make a good painting out of that picture, you know. I have a friend that she wanted me to do it was her family's homestead. It had a huge oak in front of it. And I have trouble with oak trees anyway. But she thought this big oak tree had no light in it. Oh no, it was so big and heavy you couldn't even see through it, Maxine. Well, I finally had to paint it the way she wanted it. Well, the homestead itself was really, I did a good job of. But that tree looked like, like how kids paint trees, a trunk and a great big green. I mean, you got to have definition and you got to have light, whatever. But anyway, we laugh about it today because she's, as time's gone by, she's realized she shouldn't have been trying to tell me how to paint that tree. But a good design, I've had a number of people want me to paint a certain picture, and I'll know right away. I'll say, well, this isn't the best design for it looks great in a photograph, but it will not paint well, Mm-hmm. And sometimes I've gone ahead and done it because they wanted it so bad, but I think even they realize afterwards that, well, this was not a paintable picture. And there's a lot of discernment too in deciding when you're doing a photograph what to leave out. Because mostly when you have a photograph, you don't want everything that's in that photograph in that paint. Some of it makes a bad design if you leave it in there. It'll have an angle or something that shouldn't, and nothing should show up too much and catch your eye too heavily in a photograph. But I mean, in a painting, but in a photograph, sometimes that can be the thing that makes it stand out.
Yeah, those are great thoughts. Lots to chew on there. I think for we talked about learning to see. I think for those who have who want to chew on that some more and have ears to hear, there's lots to chew on and all of that. So I appreciate you spending this time with us, and we'll close it there. So thanks again for doing this, and thanks for blessing us with your gifts and skills.